Welcome to Real GM Radio. I'm Wes Goldberg. Got a great show for you today. First, I'll be joined by the Athletics' Anthony Slater to talk about the Warriors' impressive start to the season and if they need to make a trade in order to be considered a legitimate championship contender. Then I'm going to talk with Brams Hillman from the Warriors Huddle podcast to talk about the fans' perspective of Warriors Mavericks and Klay Thompson's emotional return to the Bay Area. Let's jump in. Three, two, one. Anthony Slater is here. He covers the Warriors and the NBA for The Athletic. He also co-hosts the Warriors Plus Minus podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. Anthony, welcome to Real GM Radio.
What's up? How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Excited to talk Warriors. We're doing a big Warriors episode here. They're 9-2, fourth in defensive rating. We're recording this a couple of days after the big Klay Thompson game, but I want to start with the defense and specifically with Draymond Green. So he's playing at a defensive player of the year level again. You wrote about this for The Athletic after the Warriors win over the Mavericks, but he had moments last year where he looked locked in and looked like Draymond Green, but it's like every night this season. What's changed with him?
He's eligible to play. His big thing, number one. He's not currently suspended, which, I mean, like, it's kind of like a joking way of saying it, but like that derailed. It wasn't the only thing that derailed their season. Klay Thompson was in a massive, emotionally charged slump, and Andrew Wiggins had kind of fallen off a cliff in a lot of ways. Looney had his worst season in about the last 5, but Draymond Green, it wasn't even just like 25 games of a suspension, but it was like, what that just did to the morale of the team. I think we all know. And then, the lineups that they had to, test out when he got back. But he had a pretty good season, to be honest. I mean, that was, I think what he has said and what he voiced. So I should actually take this back. Jonathan Kuminga gets knee tendonitis the last 8 games of last regular season, and they go to Trace Jackson-Davis next to Draymond. And they played good defense down the stretch. And I think Draymond decided going into the offseason, Steve Kerr decided collectively entering the season, like he would have a center next to him in the starting lineup. He was pretty adamant about that because it allows him to play free safety. It makes it so, for 28 minutes a game, Jonas Valanciunas isn't, just like digging into his back, trying to get offensive rebounds. He still, as you saw in the Mavericks game, at their best, tensest moments, he needs to be the center. It allows Kuminga to play more. And Kuminga, I think, still one of their top 5 players. But I think the freedom of him playing the 4 has invigorated him a little bit. Looney's been better, so you can pair him. They pair him with Kyle Anderson at times. So he's just in better front court lineups. And then the other thing is their issue last year, it was a lot of Chris Paul, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Brandon Podziemski, 3 of those guys on the floor at the same time. You're not staying in front of many people. And if you're not staying in front of people, Draymond Green is like a firefighter who's got like 7 house fires at once, where he's, running over here, trying to put it out. Then he's got to go over there. DeAnthony Melton in their rotation now. Andrew Wiggins looks really good. Gary Payton is healthy. Podziemski's in year 2. He's at least a good team defender. Like they're staying in front of people better, which allows Draymond to, be a more disruptive version of Draymond instead of an eraser at all times. So there's a lot involved. I mean, I know that's like a long-winded way. Like, I don't think he's in shape, and he's focused, and he's, again, not getting suspended. But I think just the structure around him is better. Jerry Stackhouse is over there on the sideline yelling at everybody, and that's just allowed him to get back to himself.
So it's not just him, but like I said before, the Warriors defense ranked 4th in defensive rating at the time of us recording this. And, my biggest question with them is how sustainable is this thing? And there's a lot of things that we could ask, like with the Warriors, is how sustainable is this? But specifically with the defense, like Draymond's 34, 35 years old. Andrew Wiggins, I don't know that trustworthy is the first adjective that comes to mind when we talk about Andrew Wiggins and his consistency. Gary Payton II is healthy now. His health is also sort of one of those things that comes and goes. How sustainable do you think this defense is?
It's interesting. I think Wiggins is focused, motivated. I mean, he had a pretty, his father died this offseason, and that's really what weighed on him a lot the last couple of years. He was making trips back and forth. Obviously, he was leaving the team for chunks of time. It was like, it was his hero, right? His father was in the NBA and all that. And you heard it from them entering training camp. Like, he had a focus off season. I think motivated is at least to get back to himself. I would still agree that you cannot trust him offensively on a consistent basis. but he really looks like himself defensively. I mean, he was great on Luka the other night. I think I think he's played 9 games. He has had some back issues. He is getting a little older himself. But I think if he's on the floor right now, I do trust him to just play very good 6'8" rangy wing defense. And as long as that is there, I mean, you mentioned Payton, but what they have this year is, hey, Gary Payton's out. Well, D'Anthony Melton's here, and
Right.
a Pajemski. They just have more versatile lineups. Kyle Anderson is he's kind of you can plug him in, and he's going to get you 2 steals and be everywhere you want to be. So the versatility's there. Look, Lindy Waters is their 13th man. They kind of like him as like a bigger shooting guard who can kind of get out there. Moses Moody to me looks like a better all-around player, defensive player. We haven't even mentioned him. Kuminga I thought was pretty good individually the other night on Luka, at least using his size. So I think it is sustainable because the depth. I trust most is the defense, partly also because the coaching staff is like really emphasizing it. They've been obsessed with you remember the 2022 title. They were the number 2 defense in the league without traditional rim protection and all this. It was this kind of structure. And they're really focused on getting back to that. I think that is very sustainable. My concern is on the other side. Offensively, still don't have a number 2 scorer. Still, when we've seen it already this season when they play switching athletic teams and, it forced the Warriors to try to beat them one-on-one, and particularly forced Warriors not named Steph Curry to win one-on-one and get buckets. They just don't have, to me, they don't have like high-level playoff versions of that.
Yeah, to go back to Wiggins really quick too. I mean, one of the things I always look at with him is offensive rebounding, because in that 2022 championship run, I mean, he was just going all out on the offensive glass, and he was creating so many opportunities. He's second on the team right now in offensive rebounds per game. And I think I agree with you with the defense because they are versatile. One of those guards go down. Okay, cool. We could just upsize. We could just put a bunch of length on the floor. And that was kind of what they had with Otto Porter Jr. and some of those other guys that they had in that 2022 run. But let's, before we get on to the offensive part of this, I do just sort of want to go back to the Klay Thompson stuff before we get too far away from it. So we know that Klay had asked Steph and Draymond not to push the front office to re-sign him last summer. Steph didn't exactly say whether or not he abided by Klay's wishes, but we know that was sort of the ask there. You've reported on this. You also reported before the return that Steve Kerr drove up to the LA area to meet with Klay over the summer, and that Klay, after that meeting with Steve, decided, hey, you know what? I think it's best that it's time for me to leave. Do you truly think that the Warriors wanted him back?
At the right price, and I know it wasn't just at the right price, it was in the right mindset. It needed to be an acceptance of not only, hey, look, my role might fluctuate, bench some nights. Basically, the role that Buddy Hield, who we haven't even mentioned yet, has been playing great. The role that Buddy Hield is currently playing was the role that they would have been okay with Klay Thompson playing, which Buddy Hield's their 6th man. When Buddy Hield comes out and he's super hot, he might play 30 minutes. But when Buddy Hield's cold or they're playing like the other night, he didn't play that much against Dallas because it was like they need rangy wing defenders who can survive defensively. If Klay was okay with that and almost needed a voice, like I'm ready for that stage in my career, I think they would have been. I know they would have been fine welcoming back, also at the right price, right? And that was, as they told him, was like, we don't know what the right price is yet because you're going to go after Paul George, you're going to go after Lauri Markkanen, and you're going to see how the books look after you restructure around. And then they said, hey, Klay, we'll come to you with a reasonable offer that probably will fit what your market value is, even if you don't love what your market value necessarily is. But before it even got near that, he just said, no, I'm good. Like, I need a fresh start. And I will say they didn't fight it. You know what I mean? Like, again, I think if Klay was accepting of it all and was happy to come back and wanted to continue this run at the right price, in the right role, in the right mindset, all that, then yeah, sure, they could have stayed together. But Klay didn't want that. And when Klay didn't want that, they were like, if you don't want that, we'll give you a sailor hat, salute and, throw a celebration for you. But, nobody's going to be crying over it.
What was your sense of maybe going into the game versus after the game, how much that mattered to Steph and Draymond? Because I thought Draymond gave a really interesting answer after the game. He said, I don't care. This was Klay's moment. He didn't give a damn about the hats, all that kind of stuff. But then Steph in that fourth quarter just like screaming at the camera and all that stuff. Yeah. I thought that was pretty surprising too.
Yeah, last year was tough. and him not getting the extension in the preseason and everything that followed, which by the way includes, the way kind of Draymond uprooted the season in a lot of ways. Like it was just dramatic. And I think Steph, while it felt directed at Klay the other night, almost like, well, and he even admitted, it was like you going to stay here was kind of what he was barking. To me, that was his reminder, like he knows who's watching, like all the players in the league are watching, all the pundits, everybody, like that this isn't over. I think part of Klay leaving, it was painted as like the official end of the dynasty, right? Like one of the pillars is gone. We can call it. And I think especially because it wasn't just, hey, they beat Klay Thompson. It was like, hey, we're 9-2. They internally feel really good about. They have since preseason. They went 6-0 in the preseason, and you were kind of getting winks from a lot of people, including Steph and Draymond. Like, feels a little like 2022 here. So I think part of that the other night, again, it was frustration about how it went. But Steph's not like mad at Klay. I think Steph understands the human elements, and Steph's been very diplomatic about it. But I think it was just like, this thing ain't over. He may have decided to leave. That's his choice. Like, you left me. Okay. Kevin Durant left me. Okay. Guess what? We won a title after Kevin Durant left. We can win a title after Klay Thompson left because I'm still here. And Steph, like he has this, which Klay does too. And Draymond obviously does. It's more outward, but this is the internal fire. It's why he is who he is. And that was the emotional release of it. And then it's funny, you talk to him post game and he's almost wanting to kind of tame it down. Like, we are only 9-2. It might, it's a little bit early to be barking. They could go on a 5-game losing streak, but they feel very good about what they have. And I think that was kind of at the heart of that.
So you were kind of hinting at the offensive side of the ball and how that might be a little bit more questionable. So let's just sort of get into that part of it now. Offensively, they look great, but they're also hitting a ton of 3-pointers. You mentioned Buddy Hield; he's shooting 46% on about 8 attempts per game right now. Steph's been fine. I don't think we
stats up. It's like in 20 minutes. Like, he's not even playing that much. He's just chucking when he gets out there.
Well, that's the other thing too. You look at their stats here. Nobody averages 30 minutes a game. There's nobody on the team that's even including Steph. And part of that might be just because of the injury and maybe, being a little bit careful with that, coming back from that. But I wouldn't be surprised if Steve Kerr was happy with where they're at right now. Steph is averaging 24 points in 30 minutes, 29.1 minutes per game. And it reminds me a little bit of what Greg Popovich did with the Spurs 2013, 2014, where even with Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, none of those guys played more than 30 minutes a night either. And they really relied on their depth with like the Boris Diaws and the Manu Ginobilis and all that kind of stuff, the Danny Greens. But that's also a way to get, 11, 12, 13 guys on the court every night. How much of that do you think has to do? I think it has a lot to do with their defensive success. Everybody just can kind of go full tilt in small spurts. But offensively, I don't know. Maybe it goes the other way where at some point maybe they just lose a rhythm when those 3-point shots aren't falling as much as they are now.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know how long it can last. So this starts in preseason. They bring truly 12 like legitimate NBA rotation players. It was what they were allowed to do when Chris Paul walks off the books, Klay walks off the books, and suddenly they're like, we kind of got money to spend in free agency. They target 3 guys, Melton, Hield, and Kyle Anderson, who are like, they are playoff level rotation players. Mm-hmm. And then when you add that, when you have Moody on the rise, you have your 2 draft picks from the previous year, Trace Jackson Davis and Podziemski, who are ready for roles. Kuminga wants more minutes. It's like, that was the concern heading into camp. It's Steve Kerr was sitting there saying, hey, I have 12 guys and I can only play 9 or 10 in a real NBA rotation. Then they get into camp. Looney comes back in shape. Wiggins comes back in shape. That they were talking. Moody looks great. He's like, he was the 11th man in the first preseason game, and he was the best player on the floor. And it's like, that seems like, it felt like year 4. Moody's lost in the shuffle again. And then you'd be talking to people behind the scenes. They're like, Kyle Anderson's playing his ass off. Lindy Waters, they're like, this guy we got from Oklahoma City. I know we said 12 man, but it's really 13 man. Right. They were freaking out about it. And then the day before the opener in Portland, Steve Kerr is like, talking with his staff and trying to figure out which 2 guys we're not playing Lindy Waters, and then which 2 other guys do we tell, sorry, you're not in the rotation. And he just apparently was like, we're going to tell nobody. We're going to play 12 men, and they're going to all play these softened minutes. And to be honest, if they went 3-5 in their first 8 games, there'd be a lot of people complaining. but it's working, and they're winning, and what's helped is they've had a lot of blowout wins. The first 2 games of the season were monster blowouts where Steph and Draymond aren't even playing in the fourth quarter. And then you've had minor injuries here and there. Melton misses 5 games, Wiggins misses 2. That allows you to shorten the rotation and get guys minutes up, and everybody's happy. But again, everybody's happy because they're 9-2 and they're winning. To be honest, like Jonathan Kuminga doesn't necessarily love his minute total, doesn't necessarily love in year 4 searching for a big contract. He has to come off the bench. But what's he going to do right now? Like start complaining that, it's like you just beat the Mavericks the other day. You beat the Celtics and the Thunder recently. Right. But when you do talk to them and you've seen it over the last couple of games, like Steph was up towards 36 minutes the other day because they had to get a win. They were playing a better team. So as you get deeper into the season, particularly in the playoffs, like they're going to have to decide on a night-by-night basis, particularly in the second half. You said they want to script out at least an 11-man rotation in the first half and then adjust to the game. Who's playing well? What does the other team look like? I thought the Oklahoma City game was a great example. 5 minutes in, Chet Holmgren breaks his hip, and the Thunder don't have a center, so they quickly pull Trace Jackson-Davis off the floor. Looney gets a DMP. He was in the scripted rotation, but it was like, Thunder don't have a center. No reason for Looney. Trace Jackson-Davis doesn't even start the second half. They just go no center. And then that night, it's a 10-man rotation. So but again, it's just funny how sports work. You know this, but it's like they're 9-2. So we're talking about how, every button he's pushing, it's going so great. I'm telling you, when they lose 4 of 6 coming up at some point, that's when we're going to be talking about, well, this guy's not playing well. This guy's not playing well. He's not playing enough. He's upset because he's not playing enough. This lineup's not working. You should try that lineup. So they know it's coming, but it is coming.
I agree with you. It's going to be really interesting when they go on a 3 or 4 game losing streak. It's like all of a sudden, all right, well, then Steve Kerr is doing this wrong and he should be playing this guy more minutes. And then we see a lot of the stuff that we kind of got last year too from that whole situation. You look at the lineup data, it's wild. They only have one lineup. Their most used lineup, rather, has played 34 minutes together. I mean, it's crazy, and that was the original starting lineup before they pulled the plug on that when Steph got hurt. They haven't really played at all that lineup, the Curry, Wiggins, Kuminga, Draymond, Trace Jackson, Davis lineup. They don't play that lineup anymore. There's more Steph plus guard, whether it's Melton or Podziemski or Hield or whoever, Wiggins, Green, and Trace Jackson, Davis lately. You've got Jonathan Kuminga obviously coming off the bench now. You've got more small ball with Draymond playing the 5 more lately. So it definitely feels like they're still in sort of like this experiment mode. And maybe that's going to last for another 10 games, but we'll see.
82 games it might be. I mean, at this point, I'm in again. They're a candidate for a trade. If a consolidation trade presents itself, they have been sniffing around the market all summer. We all know, like, mid-November is not, heavy trade chatter season. Like I don't expect to trade in the next couple of weeks, but they make sense as a 3-for-1 at some point with the right team in the right situation for the right player. But we'll see.
I want to ask you about some trades, but before I do that, you mentioned Moses Moody, and I don't want to get too far from him, but he had a play against Dallas where I thought you really saw it kind of come together for him, and maybe there's been other instances of this, but it was the first time I saw, like, so obviously saw this was half court set, Warriors kind of get stalled out. It's the second half of the Mavericks game. Draymond has the ball in his hands. Steph can't really get open. They're both off to the right side, and then you also have Moody. And I think maybe Steph had it first, gave it up to Draymond, and then Steph does the Steph thing where he just runs around the court 18 times and then kind of comes back to where he started. And as he's coming back, he's coming back towards Moody. He loops around Moody, and Moody cuts right away towards the basket, and Draymond just feeds him. And it's an easy layup for Moses Moody. I don't know if I explained it right, if you remember the play that I was talking about, but what was so important to me about that play was, okay, well, Moses Moody gets it. Now he understands how he can play off of the Steph Curry effect, because both his defender and Steph's defender both went with Steph, kind of crawling around that Moody screen. But what also stood out to me was that Draymond knew Moody was going to cut and trusted Moody to make that cut because he led him with the pass. If Moody doesn't cut, that's a turnover, and they're going the other way with it in a close game. How have you seen Moses Moody kind of fit in? Because you were mentioning how he was a standout in the preseason. Like, you're just seeing more and more of these moments with him.
Yeah, I mean, he's smart and he's getting it more. I think what people have lost over the last 4 years because he enters the league known as kind of like like a high IQ player. You hear his press conferences, it sounds like he's like this wise 45-year-old.
I remember talking with him before
Yeah.
preseason. He was like, "Yeah, I was studying to be like a lawyer for a little bit." And I'm like, "What? Okay."
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's all true, but
Yeah.
I remember even when Chris Paul came last year, it was like he was going to be more comfortable in more of your traditional 3-and-D role. Like, I'm going to stand at the wing. Chris Paul's going to do his, pick and roll stuff. And if he hits me, I'll either take the shot or like catch and go. It was like he kind of felt more comfortable in a more simplified, like non-Steve Kerr, non-Steph Curry, non-Draymond Green offense. Like, this wasn't natural to him. I know we talked all the time about how like it didn't fit Wiseman, it didn't fit Kuminga. It kind of didn't really fit him either. But he's obviously in year 4 getting more used to some of that stuff. They have been on him for years about stop with the catch and hold. Sometimes he can be a little bit slow with the decision making. Whereas catch, stop, go, okay, I'm going to go into the lane, I'm going to jump stop, I'm going to pivot, I'm going to turn around. And that's just, that's not how they operate. They want their wings flying through the lane. Steve Kerr loves to call these players connectors, right? It's what Pajemski does so well. It's what he loves about Lindy Waters. It's why Anthony Lamb was playing over, Kuminga, Ty Jerome. I mean, we can name about 25 of these guys up there. There's JTA, right? A Steve Kerr favorite. He's doing more of that stuff, but at the same time, you still see I don't know if you have it up, but like, what is he in minutes per game on the team? He's still probably down at like 8th, 9th, 10th. And that's 10th, because it's still not as natural to him as it is to a Pajemski, to some of the other guys. But it's just been such an interesting career to this point because Steve Kerr always buries him. He always works his way somehow onto the floor at some point, and he always hits 3 straight threes, and the fan base is in a fury. Like, he should have been playing in 45 minutes the whole time. And then you also look back at every playoff run. Rookie year, he works his way into the rotation over Damian Lee in the West Finals against Dallas. He's out of the rotation in year 2 mostly, and then he's one of their like final 6. He's playing over Dante DiVincenzo in the Lakers series in the second round, and you exit that season like he's arrived. He's coming back next year. They might start him. He's going to play 30 minutes. He's buried again. But by the time, go look at the playing game against the Kings last year, like big games, he always works his way onto the floor. He always plays good. And then Steve Kerr always is hesitant to go back to him as the next season starts. So it's a push and pull, give and take. I will say he signs a 3-year, $39 million extension. They love him. They basically call him the wing version of Kevon Looney. And it fits so perfectly because the personality, the like young leadership skills and all that he has. And also just look at Kevon Looney's history. How many times has Steve Kerr buried him, benched him? They didn't pick up his option. They let him walk into free agency. But it just keeps coming back. He keeps making plays. Like, I thought Looney was done this time around, and he's kind of looking pretty good this season. And like at this point, I'd say he's playing better than Trace Jackson Davis. Yeah. So there's a lot of parallels there. Moses Moody is a very firm, solid rotation player that, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily fit the Warriors that well, but they value him, particularly front office wise, and he clearly values them to re-sign. So he'll probably just continue being a bench player that everybody clamors to play more, that doesn't play as much as he should, but still helps them in big moments.
Yeah, what's Steve Kerr favorite? Zero maintenance guys, no maintenance guys kind of thing. He's a little bit like that, right? And so
yeah, for sure.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. The basketball season is finally here, and Game Time is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. There's so many ways to save money on tickets, no matter when you buy. Game Time Picks shows you only the best values on tickets. Game Time has last-minute deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, even an hour after it starts. They have exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have zone deals where you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big savings. And by toggling on all-in pricing, you see the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. And that is sort of like the perfect. It's almost like the backup quarterback that comes in for a couple games, and the fans are like, "Why isn't this guy playing more over the starting quarterback and all that?" And those are the perfect guys to trade because they're flash in the pan here, flash in the pan there, and then another front office could be like, "Well, we could talk ourselves into it, and he could just play more minutes for us. He's actually not being used enough in his current situation. We can hit a diamond in the rough here." Um,
He was
but
in trade talks, by the way. I mean, let's
mhm,
be honest. Like,
yeah,
last year they really were. The Warriors were very interested in Alex Caruso. If that happened, my guess would be Moses Moody would have been in Chicago. If the Markkanen thing goes down, there's a very decent chance he would have been in Utah. If the Paul George thing goes down, he might have been in LA. Like, and if I was another front office, like, you're not wrong in like your assessment of that, but like maybe I'd be one of those fool front. Like, I'd
right.
be convincing myself because I think he could be a very good, like, he is a rotation NBA player. I think.
Yep. Yeah, he is, and I can understand why Steve has a hard time finding places for him every once in a while because he's almost like he's a jack of all trades, master of none, and it's almost like, okay, well, what's exactly the thing that he does at an elite level? I'm not really sure yet, and but he is a sort of like that connector guy. He's just sort of a fill-in piece, and it just, I don't know, lineups with him tend to seem to work at least. So yeah, I'm not down on Moses Moody at all. Let's talk a little bit more about Kuminga though, because he is sixth on the team in minutes. This is a guy who's in a contract year, did not sign that extension. That makes him very, very much sort of trade eligible. I'm not saying that that's necessarily why they didn't trade him to the extension, but the understanding that I have is that wasn't also a reason not to sign him, not to sign him to the extension. How, you know what I'm trying to say here. But Kuminga, his status coming off the bench now,
It was a factor, by the way.
for
Trade
sure.
eligibility that was mixed into the whole equation for sure.
So let's talk about him. I mean, starts in the starting lineup. Now he's coming off the bench. Just another one of these guys who just feels like, all right, we love the talent, not really sure where he fits in. It feels like they're almost forced to play him at times. I do agree, like he's probably one of their better players, but the fit is always the issue here with him.
Yeah, it is an issue between what a very young, very talented player wants to be and what a winning team needs him to be at this moment. Steve Kerr loves to say, I had Sean Marion in Phoenix. Sean
Right.
Marion was a massive factor when he would hit the open three playing off Steve Nash, and he would just fly down the floor, crash the glass, slash, get out, be faster than people in transition, get 22 points a game off just, garbage stuff, basically. And I don't mean garbage in a negative connotation, just like, I got a quick put back. I slashed to the rim. I beat something. Like, you didn't even run a play for me, and I just got 20 off buckets.
Right. Just found points. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, they've kind of wanted Kuminga to embrace that role for this team. He set a franchise record last season in dunks. He does what they don't do, right? He attacks the paint. But Jonathan Kuminga spends his offseason really sharpening his ball skills, his dribbling, he loves his fadeaway now in the post, which honestly, he won a game for them in Houston. When Steph's out, Pajemski fouls out, Draymond fouls out, they go to a high defensive lineup. Rockets are switching everything, and then suddenly he's hitting fadeaways over Jabari Smith and getting Jalen Green on a switch and taking him to the rim with a lefty. Like, all the stuff he worked on all summer suddenly in an overtime against a young athletic Rockets team.
Yeah.
He proved
He's a Kobe
himself.
guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
he's that's his guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are certain moments within the season. I just mentioned one right there. Overtime against the Rockets, a bunch of guys out. Like, that's really helpful for them. And honestly, like, their biggest problem is not having a second scorer next to Steph. And he would love to raise his hand to go, you already have him. It's me. But it's like, they often don't feel like that is what they need him to be. And that is where, especially as we enter year 4, he just didn't sign the extension. He's now looking how, it's a little reminds me like what the opposite of like Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon gets to figure out who he is in the NBA in Orlando, and he gets handed the keys, and you get to try to be a number one scorer. And by the time you're 27, 28, maybe you figured out, look, like, I can keep trying to do this. Orlando can keep trying to force fit it, but we're probably not going to win this way. And then he goes to Denver, and it's like, I found who I am in the league. There's a chance by the time Jonathan Kuminga is 27, 28, kind of like when Andre Iguodala did the All-Star teams, all that, and then he gets to the Warriors 6-man, figures out who he is. Kuminga might be that later in his career, but it is just, it's unfair to tell him to just accept that at 22. Accept that you're a slashing, like, energy wing. You're not a give the ball to you superstar. So that is the tug of war that goes on a nightly basis. And that is also the tug of war when you go 30,000 feet above what is happening with his career. And, like, where is it going? Is it going to remain with the Warriors? And part of it is, like, the Warriors never knew how long this Draymond, by the way, blocked him in a lot of lineups. Like, that's the lineup combination issue. And like, I think if you go back to draft night when the Warriors take Jonathan Kuminga and you told them, would Draymond Green be on the roster in 2024, 25, they'd probably go, no, our front court will be Jonathan Kuminga next to James Wiseman, who's like a stretch 5 shooting threes. Like, that was kind of the plan. But Draymond's still around, and Draymond's like a top 3 defensive player in the league right now. Right. Steph's still around. They're trying to win. Steve Kerr's still around. Like, so Jonathan Kuminga is kind of blocked. I don't know. Like, that's the complex situation at hand. But the Warriors also aren't just going to go, well, this isn't the perfect thing for Kuminga's career, so let's give him up for nothing, because he's still really talented and helps them. It's a weird situation.
And because he hasn't signed that extension, and a lot of guys in that class have, Jalen Green and kind of guys like that, he kind of climbs up the ladder in terms of trade assets across the league. It's like, okay, we don't have to pay this guy. We could pay this guy. We could determine it in restricted free agency, which I think is valuable if you're the team obviously requiring him in a potential deal. And you're right. Like, even if Draymond Green even if he was still on the roster, you might have expected at this point he could be coming off the bench in almost like an Andre Iguodala type role, because he's just a little bit lesser of a version than he used to be. But that obviously, he's still a more valuable player to his team than Kuminga is. Yeah, exactly.
He is a defensive superstar.
No doubt.
And that's just like, and that's how they feel like they need to win. And like, Draymond's argument would be like, yeah, that seems like a pretty good idea. I've been doing it forever. Like, good formula. It works. Because the truth is, like, I would love to see Jonathan Kuminga on the Brooklyn Nets, like, getting to kind of like, spread his wings. Or I know the Pacers were interested in him a couple of years ago before Siakam, right? If you just plug him in where Siakam is right now, I'd love to see if, like, how good he could be in a Pascal Siakam on the Pacers type role. But at the same time, I also understand the argument from the Warriors is like, that's not how we're going to win the championship this year, or, contend for it. It's going to be Draymond running the defense and us winning how we always have.
So, the number 2 scorer thing, you're right. Like, Kuminga maybe has that ability, but he doesn't space the floor enough. It's not exactly the right fit. So I think you hear that a lot. It's like, okay, if the Warriors can go get a number 2 scorer, that's the kind of thing that you move these pieces for, and maybe you make that consolidation trade. You start giving up some of these assets, but it can't just be any number 2 scorer. We know that. Like, Steph Curry, one of the great teammates, not the easiest guy to play with, just because everything that revolves around him is very Steph Curry-like. It's a lot of movement. It's a lot of all this. When you think about sort of the ideal number 2 scorer for the Warriors, what does that guy look like?
Yeah, look, Markkanen was very interesting to them because he was the 7-footer who hits threes, like almost a perfect front court partner next to Draymond. Paul George obviously interested them because it's like Kevin Durant light, right? That's what the Thunder did back in the day. It's like, we lost KD. What's like the next tier down below that? Like, Paul George is kind of like 72% of Kevin Durant. A big wing who can defend and hit like 44% from 3. That's ideal. Kevin Durant would be very still at this age would really fit what the Warriors need. Giannis is not that, right? He's not the floor spacing, but like, obviously, like, at this point with how things are going this season, that is a spotlight target for the Warriors potentially. I have heard like stretch 5 is one of the things that they believe is what's missing most. Is Kristaps Porzingis going to eventually be available because Boston just has this looming just financial apocalypse? Miles Turner's a guy that, in the past they looked at Kelly Olynyk at the deadline. Again, he's not a number 2 scorer, but they try to reconfigure their roster.
Brook Lopez.
Yeah. And I would say that, again, if a big chip comes available per, Giannis, let's use as the example, like, sure, they're going to try to hunt him down. They got a lot of future picks. They have young guys. Like, they could generate a pretty good package. But also, I think what this season so far is teaching them, and what this new second apron environment, I think, is teaching the league, is like, sometimes like built out depth with like at decent price tags is like far better for them than, they could have gone and got Brandon Ingram. They could have gone and got Zach LaVine this summer. And they're like, no, we're not paying that. We'd rather have, 4, rotation players that are making $7 million a year and flexibility and keep our picks and like keep the young guys, try to build them up, than just like suddenly have Brandon Ingram in-house and give him a monster extension. And then have to just go minimums, and then suddenly your 8th, 9th, 10th man are minimums who can barely play. So I think we all agree they're still one bigger player away from real true contention, but they're being very picky on who that bigger player is. And if he doesn't show up, I think they're fine like entering the playoffs and just being like, come beat this depth and Draymond Steph team. And they probably will get beat, but whatever.
Okay, so if they're like, let's 30-20-ish, 10 games over, like that's a very good record right around the trade deadline. Like, is that increasing their motivation to do something like, okay, wow, like Steph's still this guy, Draymond's still this guy, our window's still wide open? Or does that decrease their motivation to like, hey, we're 7, 8, 9, 10 games over 500. Like, maybe this is good. Maybe we're good enough.
Yeah, I mean, Steph would just tell you that like all he wants is conversations with Mike Dunleavy at key moments of the offseason and see, trade deadline, all that. Let me know the options. Let me know what you're thinking. He will discuss if he likes guys, if he doesn't. Steph has opinions. He'll never voice them, but he there are people in the league he thinks are good that would fit what he does and people who don't. And I think they want to strike. I think for the right price that, he wants probably, kind of a beefed up version of this depth around him. But again, what I don't expect is them to be 33-20 and then like they're just like, oh, we just do Zach LaVine. Like we've just got to get it done.
Right.
It's to me that's like, are we talking about like who besides Giannis? Like Jimmy Butler's a guy. Obviously, you're around. Like they've bounced the idea around, but I think at this point, I think how they're playing, how everything seems to be looking, like to me, Jimmy Butler's the more desperation play if they're 24-27 and the young guys aren't looking that good and Steph's just like, hey, like we got to shake this up. Like we just got to try something. Let's just attempt Jimmy Butler. I don't think they do something like that for the older guy that wants the extension. If things are going well, I think they only do that if it's like, look, Giannis is available. Like we can get him, like the younger superstar.
I'm just going to throw my favorite little random bit of news that came out over the last few months and kind of going into the season was that the Warriors loved Bronny, but wanted to make sure that Bronny ended up in Los Angeles. I don't remember who exactly reported that, but that was just something that made the rounds a little bit. And that to me was, knowing the front office, obviously not as well as you do, but the little bit that I know from covering the team for a couple of years, like I'm like, yeah, that seems like a Warriors front office thing to just leak out there.
They kind of rolled their eyes a little bit at that one, I will say.
Okay.
I mean, they had the 52nd pick. They got Quentin Post on a 2-way. Like they were like, yeah, no, like he was definitely higher on the board.
This idea of leaving Bronny there for the Lakers, though, to do a solid for LeBron, is that? I mean, there was that report also before the deadline last year that they made a call to Los Angeles. Like, hey, you guys interested in moving LeBron?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, there's so many cooks in the kitchen with the Warriors and opinions and like, obviously like allegiances. I will say this. I don't believe that they think that them like not taking Bronny James 52nd overall is going to lead them to LeBron James. They definitely made, we're just kind of like, it was almost like the fantasy football trade where you just like hit up the person who has, CeeDee Lamb or whatever, name your like superstar. And you're like, yeah, like, would you trade him? And they're like, no. I was like, all right, well, I'd love Bijan Robinson at like, a cheap price. I don't see it. And no, the Bronny James thing, no. Unless look, if LeBron wants to force his way there, Draymond's ready to like, maneuver, get in the captain seat, this and that. But yeah, no, that has never been on the goal line about to happen.
Are Dolphins making the playoffs?
No, heck no.
Are they making a push? Are they gonna do what they always do and just suck us in a little bit?
Beat the Patriots, beat the Raiders the next couple of weeks, and like what's sad is if you were a Dolphin fan or follower is you know, you look at some of the losses they have had, like the Cardinals lost at home, the Colts lost on the road.
Tough. Yeah.
Even the Bills won in Buffalo. They should have won that game. And then, you know, if Tua doesn't have the head injuries, like they should be like 6 and whatever right now and in prime position. But my problem is even if they somehow hunt down a playoff spot because the AFC lets an 8 and 9 team in or whatever, they're going to be in the snow in Buffalo or Kansas City and like they were last year. And like we all know how that team plays in that environment. Their only path to legitimacy in the playoffs was get a home game, win the division. They're like 6 games behind the Bills in the division.
It's like 20 years now without a home play or without a playoff win. It's going on 21.
They had the Chad Pennington game they lost. I remember the Ravens, Matt Moore in Pittsburgh, and then they had the type of team the last couple of years that should have won a playoff game.
I thought last year was the year.
Yeah, it was. They just needed one win late in the year and they crumbled. Remember the Bills game on Sunday Night Football? Like you win that, you're the 2 seed. You're playing at home. That's what they needed. Instead, they go play in 1 degree Kansas City. It might not have even been a degree in Kansas City, right?
If you just had Mike McDaniel and his commitment to the run game last year, that was like the only missing element, in my opinion, in December. And that would have been that would have been enough to probably get that 1 win, and then it looks completely different in the postseason.
Yeah, you listen to these departed players. Apparently, they're super soft, right? I saw that as a story this week. I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical of the operation in general at this point.
How could you not be? That's being a Dolphins fan. That's how it is. Anthony Slater over The Athletic covers the Warriors in the NBA over there. You can also hear him on the Warriors Plus Minus podcast, wherever it is that you get your podcast. Thanks so much for jumping on, man. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Today's episode of Real GM Radio is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineup stays in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, with Prize Picks, your picks are still alive. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my pick hits, I get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you could still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Brams Hillman, the host of Warriors Huddle podcast, one of my favorites to talk Warriors with. Welcome to Real Jam Radio, man. First time.
I'm a little nervous, dude. And you and I have recorded a ton of times. In fact, we just recorded for the Huddle, 30 seconds ago. We literally jumped over. I'm staring into the same computer screen, talking into the same mic, and I'm kind of weirded out. So we'll see, dude. I hope it plays well.
Well, hopefully you're not as nervous as maybe Klay Thompson was for last night's game. How about that for a transition?
Nicely played. I was told that he didn't care, that it was just a regular game in November. So, in fact, let me start that over. Wes, this is just a regular podcast in November for me. I'm not nervous at all. It means nothing. I'm fine.
That's exactly what we hope people appreciate it as. So, look, before we get to Klay's return and some of the ins and outs of that, how big of a win was that for the Warriors? With the emotions, everything sort of tied to it, considering that they're 9-2 now. You're experiencing it through a Warriors fan's lens. How big of a win was that?
I didn't know how big of a win it was until they pulled it out. There was a moment in the fourth quarter. In fact, let me start that over. Heading into the game, I'm looking just at the record. We're sitting there at 8-2. We're coming off a remarkably hot road streak. Everybody here in the Bay Area is back involved with the Warriors. There's Golden State fever everywhere. And so I thought, whatever, even if we lose this game, it's fine. We're still at the top of the West. And then Dallas goes up and there's like 6 minutes left and it looks like we're going to lose it. And suddenly the emotional stakes of that game become crystal clear to me. And it was an enormous game. It's huge. But shit, Wes, don't take my word for it. Look at Steph's reaction. Look at what it meant to him. That's a man who's won 4 titles. He's won 2 MVPs. He's been a finals MVP. his reaction at the end of that game wasn't any bigger than any of the other reactions we've seen. Like when he won gold, like all of that, it was peak celebrating Steph. And I think that illustrated really what it means to him, to the team, and to the fan base.
I think everybody was a little struck by how emotional it was, right? I think we all sort of anticipated it. We knew Klay, back to the Bay Area, the way that it ended, all these things. But then the fact that that game was close and competitive, it felt like a playoff game and not just like a play-in game that felt like a conference finals game. That was electrifying. And to me, it was the game of the season so far, just from, and it was emotionally charged. It was competitively charged. You had Steph on one side. You had Luka, who had a great game. On the other side, not such a great fourth quarter for Luka. But yeah, I mean, it was everything I think you wanted it to be out of a basketball game.
I don't know who this person is. Whoever the like top Hollywood writer is. Tarantino, I don't know who he would say, right? And I don't do a Hollywood podcast, so I can't give you the name, but pick that person. If you asked the top Hollywood writer, I want you to give me a story from the home team's perspective about another player coming back and then playing a full game, they couldn't write a better script than what happened last night. You know, the home team's perspective because the Golden State won, but everything else from Klay's entry to Klay playing well to the Warriors seemingly maybe are going to lose and then come screaming back. It wasn't just a movie. It was better than a movie. You could not have played it out any other way. And then the Luka thing, this is a random take, but I'll give it anyways. I thought the end of the game illustrated how Klay doesn't mean to Dallas what he meant to Golden State. Here's what I mean. And it's an impossible thing. You need him to have left to create the stakes that game had for Klay. But if Klay was still playing for the Warriors and they're playing in a game where everyone in the building knew this meant the world to Klay, and they're now down 3 and there's 5 seconds left and they're coming down the court, the chances of them going to Klay, 90%. Even Steph, I mean, like, of course, dude, they recognize what it means to him. On Dallas, no, they didn't care. Of course, Luka took that. You know, like we understood that it was the Klay game, but it's not. They don't have any emotional attachment to what he meant, so they didn't need to feed into that emotion. And it's one of the things that stuck out.
Yeah, it's such a great call because I'm watching that live and I'm like, pass the ball to Klay, pass the ball to Klay. Like everybody wants to see Klay take that shot, and you're like, no, obviously Luka's maybe the best player in the world. He's probably taking that shot. So it was you're exactly right.
It wasn't. He didn't even look over there. Like it wasn't.
Oh man, I didn't even know you were on the court still.
Yes, that's exactly right. You know, it's like I thought you were Josh Green, dude. Like, you know, that's fine. Like, okay, way to go over there.
Thanks for spacing the floor for me. So look, these kinds of games, they don't always hit the same way, right? And there's a lot of lead up to them. Like every outlet had a feature story on Klay and what he meant to the Bay Area. You know, you had ESPN and TNT running these big, you know, reels and you know, features and all this kind of stuff. And then sometimes you get there and they do the tribute video and then everything just like, okay, now it is actually just a basketball game in November. And that never felt that way. And maybe it was because everybody in the arena had these weird captain hats on or what. I don't know. Like there's just so many ways. And for the record, like there's been tribute videos, there's been returns, there's been all this kind of stuff. And very rarely has it ever been for a player like Klay. This would be like, you know, Manu Ginobili leaving the Spurs and just coming back and being like, oh my God, like this is crazy. But for you, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on today was because, you know, you do a great job analyzing the team. You've got great opinions and all this stuff, but you are a Warriors fan first, and everything that you talk about comes through that lens. And I really appreciate that from you. And so I know that you were anticipating this. Like as soon as that NBA schedule comes out, you're like, when's Klay coming back?
Yep. Because
you knew it was going to be a big deal. So in the lead up to this, were you getting emotional for this return? Did it kind of sort of wash over you and all that noise kind of going into it kind of make it a little bit numb, or where were you feeling right before tip off here?
Vulnerable and emotional, and I'll take it a step further. So we have had the pleasure of spending almost a decade with this core, with Klay and with Draymond and with Steph. But when you look at it, like if I went to a party and saw these guys, I do not occupy the same circles with them at all. But if I did and I saw Steph, I'd feel alienated from him. He's a mega superstar. He is a CEO. He's a billionaire. He comes off as approachable, but would I approach him? Hell no. Draymond Green, loved him to death, but do I feel he's approachable in a party? No, there's a separation there. The thing that has really solidified who Klay is here in the Bay Area is that he felt approachable. You know, he felt like the kind of guy who would make a random ass joke, who, if you ran into him at a bar, he'd play darts with you for 45 minutes. You know, like whatever it is, he would have like a checkers board for no reason, and you'd find yourself playing checkers in the bar. And so when he left, because of that approachability, I think it hit an emotional place that none of us really thought about or felt like it could go down. And so to have him back now and to kind of face that and to see him somewhere else and to hear him say this means nothing and it's just another team, it absolutely was a vulnerability and an emotion. And I didn't know, again, and I'm hitting this point too many times, I didn't know what it meant to me until I thought they were going to lose. And then when that felt like it was going down, I desperately needed that win, just desperately. And thank God they pulled it out, Wes.
So Steph is the one who pulls it out. Steph Curry flurry. Klay Thompson talks about it after the game, how it was like weird being on the other side of that. And then he said something that was very Klay Thompson like. He's like, I guess, we have 3 more games against these guys this season, so maybe next time we'll be able to anticipate what they do a little bit more. And I'm like, Klay, this was your team. You should know all of the things. Like, what are you talking about? That was definitely a joke, right? Like, that had to be a Klay Thompson.
I don't know. Did they go into the locker room? They're like, oh, I can't believe they went to Steph Curry. It's like, who knew they'd go to Steph Curry in the fourth quarter? Like, we should have prepared for that. Next three games, you bastards. We'll we know exactly. It's like, now we know who your best player is. Never again.
So that part was a little interesting to me. But yeah, so in the fourth quarter, then that's when it was most emotional, or was it? Seeing him walk into the arena, was it the tribute video stuff that was going on online and all that? Yeah.
Goes back to that Hollywood thing. You couldn't, even right from the jump, that it started with 2 free throws from Klay Thompson. That like you couldn't plan that. If they put that in a movie, you'd think that it was like too hard and kind of hammy, and like that would never go down in real life. And so it's almost, there was multiple reminders of who he was and what this game was, and you'd keep trying to get back to center. I saw him enter the building, got emotional, but then went back. No, it's a regular game. You see him interact with the fans up front and they give him the tip of the hat and you get emotional, like, no, it's still November. And there was a bunch of times when I walked up to the line, didn't want to admit it until they almost lost, and then that really was the hammer for me. I'm wondering if future games, of course, Dallas is a Western Conference team. We're in the in-season tournament bracket with them. Of course, we're going to see them again. But I'd almost forgotten that. Like, last night felt like such a big thing. Like that was the Klay game. It's interesting to remember that they're going to play 3 more. Like, do you think that Golden State, you covered the team forever, Raymond Ritter, will there be another nod to who he was? They're not going to give, there can't be another giveaway.
No.
But yeah, anything like, will they do another tribute, or from here on out, he is just a normal opposing player, and let's just get on with it.
I will never put anything past Raymond Ritter, who remains one of the best and most creative at his job. I can't imagine what else he would do at this point. And I would, if anybody asked me my opinion, I would say I would hope not. I think you did it, you nailed it, you aced it. It's like, you always leave them wanting more, I guess. Just don't do it. It's the George Costanza thing. You got the laugh. Don't keep going. Just walk out of the office. Walk out of the boardroom, man. That's 2 Seinfeld references in our little home and home here. I'm proud of myself.
I love them both. And I felt pressure to come up with one. So far, I'm 0 for 3. Like I like almost tried to come up with one there, had nothing. I'm kind of resentful with how quickly you came up with that one. So F you, Wes.
I've been watching a lot of Seinfeld. Where did this rank among some of your most anticipated games of the Steph, Draymond, and I suppose we can call this the Klay Thompson era now. So I'm including all the games, emotional reasons, competitive reasons. We're talking about all the NBA Finals games, like Oklahoma City Game 6, Rockets 2018 Game 7 Western Conference Finals, Kevin Durant's return, which was sort of sapped of whatever drama because of the pandemic, and that whole weird thing. But is this, like, where did it rank in terms of the most anticipated games of this era?
Everyone has been pretending. I can't project. I'll keep it just for me. We took him leaving fairly hard. One of the ways we've kind of protected our hearts against that is to not acknowledge how much it hurt. And a symptom of that was pretending that this game didn't mean that much. I now know that it does. I'm on the other side of it. But if you're asking as far as anticipation, we all pretended like we weren't anticipating this one, so then there's all those other, the Game 7s, the championship games, all those things. I can tell you that afterwards, the jubilation I felt, like how good it made me feel, isn't that far off from all the championships. And, and that's saying a lot for, I at the risk of being too transparent, I've rooted for this team for 30 years. I watched them be terrible. And so when they won championships, you can imagine the kind of turnaround and how excited it made me feel. When we pulled this one out because of the emotional stakes, I was almost as excited. It's not the same as like the first title, but it dragged out very similar satisfaction, let's say.
What's the thing? So we're recording this the day after the game. It'll probably come out maybe 2 or 3 days after the game. But what do you think it is that you'll remember from this game a month, 2 months, 2 years from now?
Steph taking the game by the throat, not only ending it, but then telling the world that he ended it. Going down. He could have, that night celebration leading to a scream could have gone anywhere. He could have gone to the Dallas bench and done it. He could have gone to the Warriors crowd and done it. He could have gone to the Warriors. He found the camera and went out of his way to go ham into that camera. That's the thing that will always stick out to me. And he's just, every single time, Wes, I think I can't be more impressed, or you can't do something that I haven't seen, or that, okay, you're not going to top what I already think of you. He proves me wrong every time. And last night was just another example of it. And he gave some quotes afterwards that suggested it meant a ton to him. Steph never really talks about his own accomplishments. And he pointed out a couple of times in the presser that he scored the final 12 and that he's the guy who closed it out. And so I think Steph may have even impressed Steph last night, which is awesome.
So, he hits the big shot in the Olympics, delivers gold to Team USA, all those things. And I'm like, this could be like the crowning achievement. This could be it. This could be, or not the crowning, but the punctuation, right? And that would be totally fine. And we get a couple more fun Steph years, and that's it. And like, by the way, that still might be exactly what happens, because this was, at the end of the day, a game in November and a pretty meaningless win, despite the fact that it was part of the NBA Cup and whatever. But it does feel like he's not done. And he's trying to tell you, I'm not done. And that part is really thrilling here, because he keeps doing this, and it's him, and it's LeBron, and it's Kevin Durant, and it's all these guys who are of this sort of generation that are just still doing this at this age. And you're just like, oh, like these guys are not going to go down without a fight. And I do, we've seen, and I don't want to do this whole conversation, but I'll talk to whatever. Let's just get into it. We've seen older players age, and not so gracefully in the past. And who knows what the future holds for these guys? But it just feels like they are holding on to their primes or something close to it for so much longer. And they can still have and deliver these moments, these emotional moments to the fans, these moments that still make you say, wow, I can't believe I still get to watch this stuff. I remember 10 years ago staying up on, and this is before I even moved to the Bay Area, staying up on the East Coast for these 1 a.m. games on the West Coast, because I had to watch this Steph Curry guy do what he was doing. I've seen enough of the Sports Center highlights. I got to watch it live. And I remember sitting on a couch at 1 a.m. in Broward County, just being like, I can't believe what I'm watching right now. And now then I covered him in person in the Bay Area, and now I'm back here in Miami watching him do the same thing 10 years later. So let's zoom out a little bit, talk about the team here. He's still doing it. The Warriors won the game. Steph Curry still looks like he's capable of being the best player on a championship winning team. What are your thoughts on this team? They're 9-2 in the time of us recording. Their defense looks great. Steph's still amazing. Steve Kerr's playing 11 or 12 guys most nights. He already said it's probably not sustainable long-term in terms of going that deep into the rotation, but are you buying into this team?
Half-heartedly, and here's why I say half-heartedly. I'm protecting myself, Wes. We all entered into this year thinking, okay, it's not a contending year. Let's just enjoy Steph Curry, see what happens. The Warriors clean their books. And so at some point this offseason, or maybe around February, they'll make another acquisition and we'll really see what the team is there. But they've been so damn good, man. They've been so damn good, and they've taken away all the excuses. Now they've beaten the real teams. Now they've gone on the road. Now they're continuing this streak that I'm starting to take away that protection from my heart and starting to believe, but I'm worried about it. The things that stick out to me, the defensive rating. I think they're second in the league. That's the casual fans or real NBA fans who haven't been able to watch the Warriors over and over again most likely think the championships were from the offense. That's only partially the case. The Warriors' real skill set and the reason they were winning chips before was defense. That seems to be back. And they also, you and I talked about this a little earlier, think they might be, if not at the forefront, part of a very small group of teams that is bringing in the new reality, depth. It used to be the big three. Now it's starting to feel like you want to have 2 or 3 waves of people you can throw out. I'm stealing this take from you. The Cavs are doing the same thing. And so there's these glimpses, these reasons to believe it just might be real. And so, I'm not, if I had to bet a mortgage payment on something, like, am I going to put it on the Warriors to win it all? No, I'm not. I'm not to that place yet. But if I'd had this conversation with you 3 weeks ago, it'd be laughable. It'd be a joke question. Like, I know you wouldn't be asking me if they're really a contender. It'd be a needling question. Now it's a real question. It's an actual thing. And so we'll see as this continues to play out. I think I read somewhere you want a team to play 20 games before you can really give it a grade. So, we're about halfway there. But I'm starting to believe, dude. You tell me. So I get too fucking optimistic on this stuff. Forgive the F-bomb. How are you viewing them? Is this a contending team?
I'm still trying to figure it out, if I'm being honest, because there's a lot of things that, okay, they've got a lot of, I do think there's something about the depth point there, and they certainly are, they've got the depth. Some of this hot shooting, I do wonder if it's manageable. I do think that, okay, it's cool for the first 11 games. What happens when they spiral into a 3 or 4 game losing streak, which happens to everybody? Does all this sort of kumbaya have everybody sacrificing, willing to play a role? We don't know whose minutes are what every night. It's just sort of a meritocracy every single night. Does that get stale and say, hey, we actually need to figure out what we're doing here? We got to get organized. There's 2 sides of that coin. So I do wonder what happens when they eventually do stumble. But look, they went through a really tough stretch. I know they were like 5-2 or something, whatever it was, or 5-1, whatever it was, going into a pretty tough stretch. And I was looking ahead as okay, you got Boston, Oklahoma City, Dallas, and Cleveland. Yep. Like that's going to be a gauntlet. Like, what do you do there? That'll be a real test. And they went 3-1. And so I can't ignore that. Like, you can't ignore that. And so there's that part of it, but there is part of me that says, hey, it's cool to have 11 or 12, but when the playoffs come down, like, who are the 7 that they trust? And are those 7 good enough? And then all of a sudden this depth thing becomes a little bit less of an advantage. And I just feel like I need to know who the number 2 scorer is on this team. And that brings me to my final thing here, my last little segment here.
Can I give you one more reason why I kind of believe in the Warriors? We entered this year talking about, well, how could the Warriors contend? And there's maybes when you're talking about the future of basketball, right? Mm-hmm. And some maybes are impossible. I could have said, well, maybe if Kevon Looney averages 10 3-pointers a game, we'd have a chance. Or maybe if Draymond Green becomes our second leading scorer, we have a chance. I could throw that out there, and would it give us a chance? Sure. But is that ever going to happen? No. But there's these other maybes that are coming together. Maybe Wiggins was just distracted and he needed some change to come back and be 2-way Wiggs. Maybe Buddy Hield did just need the one system that recognized who he was and he was going to contribute. Maybe D'Anthony Melton could stay healthy. Maybe the Warriors were right about Podziemski. Maybe Steph can still lead a championship squad. And all of those maybes are still there. We're still being able to talk about. And so there's a lot of hoop to be played. And I don't know if they will be yeses, but we're still having those opportunities. And for as long as that happens, they got a shot.
I'll take that one step further. Steve Kerr going into this season said that the Warriors have to be 2 things: elite defensively and elite in terms of 3-point shooting volume and accuracy. And he identified those things before they played a basketball game as those are the requirements for us to be competitive in what we want to be. And they are doing both of those things. They're 4th in defensive rating at the time of us recording this. They are, I just had it in front of me, they are third in 3-pointers made per possession. So they're elite in both of those categories. And those are the things that Steve Kerr wanted them to be. So I don't know if Steve Kerr had that diagnosis with the basis of that's what it's going to take to be a championship contender, but that's what it's going to take for us to hit that baseline that we need to hit, and they're hitting that right now.
What's your editing capabilities? Can you make it sound like I said 4th defensively, not 2nd, like earlier? Or
I promise I'll take that out.
Okay,
we'll definitely do that. Yeah, we'll
the second I saw the screen, I could tell from your eyeball, I saw the reflection. He's checking stats. I was like, oh my God, he's checking the defensive thing. I think I'm wrong on that. Then here we are. My nightmare played out.
They were second like a week ago. Okay,
appreciate you saying that. There you go. No, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of, all right, so this is a team that has a bunch of assets, a bunch of things. They're ripe for a trade, not a secret. They've been aggressive on the trade market, also not a secret. They reportedly chased Larry Markkinen. That didn't work out. Paul George over the summer. That didn't work out. They're going to be aggressive. So I'm going to throw you just some names, and you just give me a yes or a no in terms of whether or not you'd be interested in the Warriors acquiring that player. Very different levels of player, kind of all across the spectrum here. First one, we'll start easy. Robert Williams III. Just came back from Portland this week.
Does he come with like healthy knee ligaments?
No, it's just the way he is.
No, hard no. He is exactly what I'd like to add. Defensive presence, good rebounder, shot blocker. I mean, all of that stuff, but he feels like an injury waiting to happen. And so if it's like a flyer, it's second rounders, sure. Something legit. No, I'm out.
Brooke Lopez.
Now we're talking more in my interest level. I like that he provides spacing. We need somebody big. This is one to like, if it's like, hell yes, like I don't care what they need, or hell no. Brooks in that, well, what are we giving up? You've got my interest. That's a name I'd like to add, but it's not an automatic yes. Whatever they want, send it out.
Zach LaVine.
Similar to Robert Williams, but closer. I mean, if he was just healthy, like if there wasn't injury concerns, he'd be one of those names I would tell you, yep, let's do it. He can score. He can play a little bit of D. He's got kind of a dog in him, but his injury history makes me concerned.
If Buddy Hield's shooting like this, there's no reason for it, right?
Yep.
Like you could argue you're probably getting more out of the Buddy Hield, DeAnthony Melton, Gary Payton II, Moses Moody, Brandon Podziemski bullpen than you would playing LaVine 30 minutes.
Yep.
Zion Williamson.
I don't know what to make of him. He seems to fit into, well, let me start this over. I have to acknowledge that the Warriors are going to have to get somebody who's available for a reason. No other team is just going to try to help them out. And so me continuing to be like, well, I'm worried about the injuries. The reason why they would be able to get them is because they're injury prone. You're not going to get people without those rationale. And so I understand that Zion's injury prone. And that's what would make him available. I like him. I still kind of believe in his upside. He feels like a lottery ticket. Like if he can just stay healthy, now you've got this giant difference maker. But no, the hamstrings seem to be made out of tissue paper, man. You just can't. Not only can you not trust him, he screwed me on my fantasy team last year. And so I haven't forgiven him for that at all. So like, no, I just can't do it.
So he's out.
Yeah.
Giannis. Easy one.
Yes. He's a screaming yes. But can I be honest with you? I'll give you another name from the Milwaukee fire sale if it happens. Bobby Portis. It's like no one's talking about it. It's not a thing, but I think you'd have to give up way less. He can actually shoot the three a little bit. And if he locks in and it's he and Draymond, we would be that team nobody wants to play. We'd be tough and FUE.
Yeah, I don't know that Adam Silver will allow that, but it's a great call. I think I'm a Bobby Portis guy. He's obviously having a very rough season. It's a down season, but he's also maybe one of these guys that needs a change of scenery, right? He didn't forget how to shoot and play a little bit of defense and be a team player, which I think mostly he has been over the last few years in Milwaukee. So I don't mind that actually at all. I think that adds a little bit of oomph, a little bit of muscle to that front line that they could use.
If it happened, I'd like there to be like a Netflix starting five like camera crew that's in Rudy Gobert's house when the trade's announced. And we just see what his reaction is to having to play the Warriors with both Draymond Green and Bobby Portis. Same thing with Jordan Poole, but I don't know if I'm allowed to make that joke, so I'll keep it in pocket.
Jimmy Butler.
You tell me, dude. You tell me who is he now? We entered this year. I was very interested. And he's one of those guys that I had circled and made sense. We've talked about him on the Warriors Huddle. But this season, I don't get. I'm not being able to watch him in the same way that you are in the arena. So is he close to Jimmy Butler? Like if 10 out of 10 is Jimmy Butler, where is he now? 6 out of 10, 8 out of 10? I can't tell where he is in his career.
It's hard, right? He's missed essentially all of the last 3 games. He got hurt, 3 games ago pretty early in the first quarter. So he's basically missed 3 games straight now with this right ankle sprain. And before he was there, he didn't look exactly engaged, which was always the strange thing to me about Jimmy Butler is that this was essentially a contract year for him. He has the option to opt out of a $52 million contract next year and become an unrestricted free agent and perhaps sign his last major deal of his career. And so, yeah, contract year. There's a lot of motivation. There's a lot of reasons to come out engaged and motivated the way that he wasn't last year, quite frankly. And so, but my thing going into this year was want to and ability are two different things. And he's 35 years old, and sometimes you just don't got it anymore. And to be honest, those first few games, it didn't look like Jimmy Butler had it anymore. There was moments, but I think the idea if you're Golden State would be, well, he doesn't have to be the guy here. The thing that makes Jimmy Butler special has never been his scoring. That's not what he's.
Right.
He is an efficient mastermind, a manipulator of the basketball game. He is, when he wants to be, a lockdown defender. He gets steals, creates turnovers, which are incredibly important and valuable. And more than, he just doesn't turn the ball over, right? Doesn't make dumb mistakes, knows exactly where the ball has to go. He's a team first, pass first kind of guy. It's actually really easy to see him thriving in that Golden State ecosystem next to Draymond and Steph. The question is whether or not he can thrive at the ability that they need him to thrive at. So I don't know. And I also don't know what it would cost to get him. I don't know.
Right.
It probably isn't as much as that you would have to, pay Utah to pry Larry Markkinen away. I shouldn't say that because he means more to the organization than he does to any other organization. Jimmy Butler does to Miami, but in a vacuum, he's a 35-year-old player whose best days are probably behind him, who's due for a lot of money next year.
Right. The sexiest thing I can say about Jimmy Butler for me now is that he's never been known for his 82 games during the regular season. It's the putting on the cape during the 16 games, and so that's, who knows? It's possible that we're seeing the decline and he doesn't have a cape anymore, or, this is just kind of part and parcel of he doesn't really care about the regular season. Although this season particularly, that they didn't pay him last year and that they've given him all these reasons to be like, no, you should probably care about these 82 because it's going to make a big difference for you. Pauses me a little bit. Here's what I'll say. We're very pompous right now, Warrior fans, and I would imagine Mike Diaz. And so the same way, if I had a car that I just loved, what you would have to offer for me to give it up versus I didn't really like this and I needed a new car anyways. And so right now, these trade conversations, we get to view them in this really pompous way. Well, we're pretty good.
Right.
I don't know if we need. Fast forward and we slow down a little bit. We have this conversation again and we're a little bit closer to 500. Suddenly all those names are very sexy to me and you have my attention. But right now it just feels like let's see what we got. I want to, can we maintain this? Can Buddy Hield stay out of the Buddy Hield cycle? Is he just going to play well, or are we going to find ourselves where every other fan base who's ever rooted for him, found themselves? So I right now, if Mike Dunleavy called me and said, there's a list of names I have on my desk. Do you want to hear them or should we wait to see what happens? I'd go with the second option. I'd be like, keep that list handy. Don't ball it up and throw it away. There's a chance we're going to be revisiting it soon. But for right now, let those calls go to voicemail. Let's see what happens.
Let's say it was Rob Pelinka that was calling.
Well, then that makes the difference. 100%.
LeBron James. Where are you on that? Because you're a Warriors fan. There's been a lot of battles between the Warriors and LeBron James over the years. This is purely hypothetical, but I also think that it's not a secret that the Warriors would be very interested in LeBron. I mean,
post-Olympics, dude. Post-Olympics. If they had brought in, after watching that, I mean, to bank what you're saying, post-Olympics, if it needed not only to bring in Bronny, I don't know, does LeBron have a daughter? I would have been like, yep, bring her in too. I don't care. I loved watching them play together. As an older sports fan, I loved kind of watching their age group continue to do it. And so 1,000% I would have been on board. I mean, 1,000%, I would have thrown away all the hatred I've had. And yes, let me acknowledge, I've hated LeBron as a passionate fan who is in constant finals matchups over and over. And I couldn't stand him. You and I have had arguments on air about LeBron versus Jordan, all of that. Right. But following the Olympics, I was 1,000% on board. So it's not just the concept of LeBron to the Warriors. I'd do it. He still fits into the same group right now for me. We're pumping. We just beat Boston in Boston. We just went to OKC and slapped them. As of right now, I just want to see what happens. But I'm not confident enough to tell you no for sure. Give me a little bit of time. Of the names you just gave me, of all those names, LeBron would be second, behind Giannis.
Yeah.
And
I'm with you.
It says a lot.
So much fun talking Warriors with you. We just did today an hour and a half talking Warriors, overlapping only a little bit, I thought.
And no, we killed it. And actually, forgive me. I know you got to get the hell out of here, but it's a question I forgot to ask you in the first one, and you're the only person in my life I can ask it to. So the Dwayne Wade statue got all the attention that it got. And if that's me, if they unveil that, I now have problems going to the arena. Like, I don't want to pass. If I'm Dwayne Wade, I don't want to pass that. Or like, I don't want to see that every time. I don't want to know it. And I don't want to know in 30 years when people have forgotten kind of what I look like, that's the reminder they're going to get. It's like, did he have some kind of physical disability? Or like, what's going on with that guy's face? So my question to you is, does D Wade have the kind of power? I mean, you can't trash.
So he designed it.
But he didn't know what the face would look like, did he? Like,
he knew exactly what the face was going to look like. There are photos out there of him looking at the face.
I saw that, but it hadn't been like bronzed yet. Like maybe you couldn't tell it like what the final thing is.
It's like without the bronze.
It looks like Lawrence Fishburne after like going through like 8 wars. It looks like that statue.
To me, it looks like Terry Rozier. He's on the Heat now. And I'm like, how did this guy get a statue? So the guy's shooting 40% this season.
If Dwayne Wade went to the powers that be in Miami and they're like, dude, cut off the head.
Here's what I think is going to happen. Here's what I think is going to happen is my guess. And I have no reporting on this. So please, nobody aggregate. I would guess within a few months, the lower body stays the same and that head just miraculously changes overnight. There's a new head placed on that statue. And I don't think it's going to come from D Wade. I think it's going to come from the organization because I think Dwayne Wade doesn't want to admit that because he was so involved with it that it needs fixing. But I think the organization would be like, we need this thing to look. It's our first and only statue. We need it to be awesome. Right. And right now it's not awesome.
Yeah. And people are talking about it.
Yeah, it's a meme. Yeah, it's like it's embarrassing. And this is an organization that does not wants to be anything other than embarrassing. So it's a good question. But yeah, like I said, we did an hour on your show, a half hour on this one. So for those who have not checked it out, like I said, not a whole lot of overlap. It was a very fun, fascinating conversation about the Golden State Warriors and where they are now, where they're headed, the whole Klay Thompson back in the Bay Area. You can check that out on Brams Podcast. It's the Warriors Huddle. You can find that wherever you get your podcast, YouTube, all the things. Bram, thanks so much for joining me, man. This was fun.
Appreciate you. Not many people in my life. I could do 90 minutes uninterrupted, no crossover. So yeah, you are very good at this and my pleasure, man. Appreciate you having me on.